Hey there, it's Jason Stein, host of Cars and Culture with Jason Stein on SiriusXM, as well as on this YouTube channel. We interview everybody, actors, athletes, musicians, business leaders. We talk to the people who lust for the vehicle and the people who make them. So like and subscribe. Let us know what you think right here on Cars and Culture.
This is John Doonan, and you're listening to Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
It's been said that he's the nicest person that you'll ever meet. The broadest grin you'll ever encounter, affable, engaging, and he's about consensus building and making things work, but he's not afraid to make the tough decisions when it comes to what will work. John Doonan, welcome into Cars and Culture.
Thank you, Jason. I am so thrilled to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity, and we're on the eve of something really special in endurance sports car racing, but this is a moment for all of us in car lover land.
It is indeed that. I want to talk about that to a great extent, but I want to ask you about the quote, consensus building and making things work, not afraid to make the tough decisions when it comes to what will work.
No,
You agree with that?
That's very kind, first of all. All those things make me blush, to be honest. But the consensus building part, I think I learned mostly in my time at Mazda, to be, a credit to the culture around that company and that brand, and the time that I spent in Japan with some of my best friends to this day. That was something I learned about how they operated the company, and how I've tried to carry that through to my everyday business, how we ran the Mazda Motorsports program all those years, and how I've tried to bring that type of team management style, but consensus building here at Mazda, or here at IMSA.
It's an easy slip.
Yeah, it is. My apologies. We're talking about both of them, but bring it here to IMSA, not only internally within the building here in Daytona Beach and my teammates, but in our paddock, among our 18 OEM partners, and among our overall corporate partners. It's important, because if we're going to grow the sport that we love, I think that's a critical element of it.
But as the president of IMSA, you're around racers. You've been around racers all your career, and you know that racers sometimes, they can be scoundrels and scallywags and cutthroat competitors who just as soon throw you under the transporter as share a cup of coffee with you. How in the world can you be such a nice guy around all those folks?
Well, first of all, yeah, they all have opinions, that's for sure. And it comes in a lot of fashions, whether it's a in-race ruling or BOP before or after a race. There's a lot of things for that. But I think, and we have a saying here, which I've come to know and love, and I think it carries back. We didn't necessarily say it in my previous life on the OEM side, but the market will speak, and we want to do what's right for the audience, for the sport to grow. So we'll take and have open ears at all times. And at some point you got to make a decision. So it's absolutely great for people to share their ideas and thoughts, but in the end, the market will speak. And as we've developed rules and new classes and these new cars that we're going to launch this weekend, the market spoke. The OEMs made commitments. The engine builders made commitments. The hybrid powertrain partners made commitments. So in the end, certainly hear everybody out. But at some point we need to make the best decision for the sport and for the growth of the sport. But you're 100% right. There are occasions that it becomes a little bit of a daycare center.
Let's talk about your Mazda experience. You were responsible for supporting a very successful grassroots program, primarily built around the MX-5 Miata, the original Zoom. Talk about life at Mazda Motorsports. Was it difficult to get the company to buy into the level of support that you were giving to grassroots racing?
No, and I was the lucky guy that was at Mazda at a time where there was significant growth behind Spec Miata as a class at the grassroots level, And then we had a leadership team there that believed that it was all about driving. It was all about the joy of driving and building products, whether it was a 7-passenger SUV or a 2-seat sports car like the MX-5 Miata, that they were passionate about making sure those cars handled properly, had the right power to weight ratio. So when you have a group of leaders of a car company that are that passionate about cars, car culture, racing, high performance driving, it certainly helped. We also had to have a business model that worked, and the grassroots program and the 20,000 racers that were in the database, there was a business model that allowed us to do racing as a revenue and profit center. It allowed us to again expand into professional racing, whether it was MX-5 Cup as a professional series, touring cars when we had Mazda 6, Mazda 3, and then ultimately the prototype or the DPI program. Without that foundational program on the grassroots side, we would have never been able to do the professional stuff. So there was definitely a regular governance meeting with all the senior leadership to make sure that the program penciled. And then I think it was a challenge to the marketing team. If we're going to invest this much in actual activities and doing the racing, we need to invest this much in telling people about it and why it mattered. And I think we got there, and MX-5 continues to be an awesome series. The racing is ridiculous, as I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners know. It's incredible, and we are proud to have that in the IMSA portfolio now as a series that we sanction.
And it's probably not a stretch to say that Mazda was integral in the growth of open wheel racing in the country, and a whole series of drivers who we know today started in that system.
Yeah, that one gives me chills, to be honest, Jason. That was a project. It was, and you'll laugh at this because you know a lot of these players, but that program was sketched out on a napkin at Robert Davis's house one evening. And you know, we as racers, all of us know how expensive the sport is, what it takes to get a program together, what it takes to get corporate partners together, from go-karting all the way up to top level open wheel racing. And that's what it was about. And a lot of those drivers, we had our eyes set on bringing them to our sports car program. But it turned out that Skip Barber needed a manufacturer partner. The new Formula Atlantic was looking for an engine partner. We had Star Mazda already, and all of a sudden, all these pieces started falling into place. And we presented it to the executive team and said, you know, Mazda can be the brand that gives opportunity, makes dreams come true. And we were providing scholarships from you know, karting to young men and young women who wanted to go up the ladder. And for 12 years, we funded at least 4 to 5 drivers to the top level. And you look at a race like the Indianapolis 500, at some point, it was 27 or 28 out of 33 drivers that at some point in their career had been part of that. And kind of a dream come true to put it together. I'm really proud of what we did for the industry. And then the same happened on the sports car side. We had what was called the Road to 24, and from, you know, Spec Miata, as you mentioned earlier, all the way up to IMSA, we were providing drivers a chance to go where their heart desired and where they dreamed to go. And it always makes me proud, like even looking at the Rolex 24 entry list, which we announced earlier this week. You know, there's a plenty of drivers on that entry list that, again, at some point in their career, part of that program. So, you know, you see your kids grow up, if you will, and that's kind of what it's all about.
When you grew up around the grassroots side of the sport as well, and you know, whether that was from what I've read, rushing to the mailbox after school to collect entry forms that had come in. Your mother was the chief registrar. Latest issue of the Chicago region's Piston Pater, I think it was called, or SCCA Sports Car Magazine. Your dad also was a racer in the Midwestern Council.
Yep.
So you've been around all of this. You were in timing and scoring when you were 9 years old. You rode on the equipment trucks of in Blackhawk Farms or Road America with flags. You've been around this thing right from the beginning, John.
I have, and like you, and again, so many of your listeners, somebody baptized you into car culture, into the passion for the automobile. And I'm so fortunate that it started with my grandfather. He was a car guy through and through, bought and sold cars, repaired cars. So when I went to visit, it was all about the latest collection in the garage or on the pre-owned car lot. That fell right into my dad. And my grandfather raced circle track midgets on the East Coast in the late 40s and early 50s. And by some miracle and some folks that played a really key role, I acquired my grandfather's Curtis Craft midget recently. So I have that car here in the Daytona Beach area, which I'm so excited about. I can't fit in it, so I don't know how tall you are, but maybe we can get somebody that can fit in that car. But it's an Offenhauser midget, and then working on my dad's original race car, which of all cars, believe it or not, was a Volkswagen Beetle. And it broke down in front of our house in Chicago in the winter of '74. And by the spring of 1975, it was a road racing Volkswagen Beetle. So, it does pass through generations. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that the next generation understands the history of the automobile, certainly of racing as well, but mainly the automobile, why it's so important to us. And I'm intrigued, and I'm also encouraged by some of the passion I've seen out of young people recently, and those that are attending our races. A lot more families with young kids with little matchbox cars in their hands and things like that, which is exactly how I grew up.
You had a couple of boyhood dreams. The one was to work for Mazda and in motorsports, check. And the second was to work for IMSA.
Yeah.
Check. With all of that in mind, I know there are sacrifices, and the motorsports career is a lifestyle, not a job.
Yeah.
And I know the challenges and sacrifices are numerous. You're out on the road a lot of weekends. Must have been taxing on the family. How'd you juggle it all?
Still juggling it, to be honest. But you're right. A lot of dreams. I saw my first IMSA race on TV in 1979. It was all highlight clips on CBS. They were getting ready for that first broadcast of the Daytona 500. But for my family, my dad, my mom, and my sister, it was what we did, on weekends. As my wife and I built our family, it was already woven into my blood. She knew what I was planning to do and wanting to do, and she's been incredibly supportive of that. And it's tricky to balance. There's been a lot of when the kids were little, ballet recitals and baseball games and red-eye flights from Hiroshima and Tokyo back or California and back to be part of and be present. So it's not easy. I think you hit it on the head there with it being a lifestyle. And I think that's what I've found when I got here to IMSA. You got a team of motorsports professionals that have chosen this as their lifestyle. And it's a commitment. It's just like a driver going into a corner. It's a commitment. And I'm super proud that I'm around a group of people now here at IMSA that have that same level of commitment to see the sport grow and have a passion for it.
When did you know that you'd achieved all that you could at Mazda?
As a racer, you're only as good as your last race, or you're only as good as your last lap, and your track record lap. Honestly, there's things I look back that I still wish I could have continued to develop and do there. But when we started the DPI program, we hadn't won a race in like 5 years. And many of those races we didn't even finish. We had reliability challenges and things like that, but we had a mantra at that company that still exists, of course, which was never stop challenging, never give up. And in 2019, thanks to massive commitment and continued commitment from the executive team, a massive level of engineering support from Multimatic, Larry Holt and Stephen Charsley, namely, we finally, reached victory lane after 7 years of not winning a race. And you can imagine going into the boardroom, telling the executives, like, I promise this time it's going to work. And finally it did. And, we won the 6 hour at Watkins Glen, which was really funny because I knew I was departing Mazda, but not many others did. And so it was a very strange feeling. And then we won the next weekend again. And lo and behold, we won 3 in a row. And the win at Road America in particular was really, really special. That was where I grew up with my family, and my mom and sister were there, and so many friends. And it was a special moment. But through that 2019 season, I knew I was leaving. So it was a very interesting phenomenon, to be honest.
How'd you find yourself at IMSA?
So it happens because of the vision of one man when it comes to IMSA, our chairman, Jim France, and relationships. Ed Bennett, Jim and Ed called. It was in the March of 2019, and said, "Hey, when's the next time you'll be in Florida? And would you be willing to come and sit down with us?" And they didn't tell me what the agenda was, and I came on my way to Sebring the following week, and we had a visit, and they shared that they wanted me to become the next president of IMSA. And you can imagine, I was floored. I was very emotional. And, it was, again, a second to some people, they have dreams and maybe not able to achieve one of them. And here I am now being presented with the chance to fulfill 2 of my boyhood dreams in a sport that I love. And it was really special. And when I officially got announced in October of 2019, I called Jim and thanked him. It was a very special day. And I happened to be in California finishing up at Mazda when the announcements happened. And I promised him, and then I also called Mitch Bishop, the son of John and Peggy, who founded IMSA with Bill France Sr. And I said, to both of them, I know enough about IMSA and the core values that it was founded on. And it's my vision and my commitment to you both, to the France family and to the Bishop family, that I will operate the company on that same set of core values. And it's what I'm trying to do, and what both families, I think, stood for, and what I want to carry on in terms of a history.
What was the response from your former automaker competitors when they learned they were giving the keys to the playground to one of their competitors?
It's funny. In the very first meeting, when all the OEMs came for a competition and a technical meeting, I said, I'll make you a promise, but I need a promise back from you all as well. Because I had sat in their seat, 6 weeks before that or whatever. And I said, one, I need you all to, when you come to the racetrack, show your true performance. The sandbagging piece was never something that I believed in, or I tried to instill it in my drivers. They didn't think that was good because so many others were sandbagging. But I told the OEMs, we're here to put on the best performance possible for our fans, the ones that are at the racetrack or the ones that are watching on NBC. I said, I need that from you. And when I know you're doing that, like I always wanted to do when I was in your seat, you have my commitment that the regulations, the balance of performance will be in a place to the best of our abilities and the engineering staff we have here, such that you have a fair shot. And that's all I wanted when I was running. Like I wanted to be one of the 6 cars going into the last lap with a chance. Then and again, as you know, based on your experience in the industry, then it comes down to the driver, or it comes down to preparation, or the team executing on a pit stop. So that's what I asked them for, and I think I'm fortunate. I think based on the racing that we've seen and what we've delivered, I think to the fans, a commitment that everybody is willing to do that. As always, racers are racers, and you can't take that out of them. So there is clearly opportunities for people to maybe sandbag here and there, but the only way for us to get to good competition is to have good data, and we can adjust the cars, and balanced performance is a tough topic.
Yeah. Let's get into balance of performance and the elephant on the racetrack, if you will. Will you explain what that means? Balance of performance?
Yes, it's when you break it all down, and I have the immense opportunity to sit on the IMSA technical committee, and it's maybe a little strange for someone that, for lack of a better term, is the commissioner of the league, to sit on the rulemaking committee. But we have an IMSA technical committee, and we work on balance of performance. Balance of performance is taking a variety of cars, and let's maybe hone in on our GT category first. You've got 10, 11 manufacturers bringing a GT car for competition. Acura, AMG, BMW, Ferrari, Corvette, Porsche, Lamborghini, Lexus, McLaren, you got them all. Okay, so you have all these brands bringing a car. Some of them are front engine, rear drive. Some of them are normally aspirated. Some of them are turbo. Some of them are more sedan-like, if you will. Some of them are more silhouette style GT cars. When you have that amount of variety, you got to focus on how to make the playing field level, such that we can put on a great show. It's not manufactured performance. It's taking different aerodynamic configurations, taking different weights of the vehicles. They don't all weigh the same. Taking the engines that make power differently. A turbo engine spools up. A normally aspirated engine, typically you put the power down and it responds immediately. It's different fuel capacities. They use fuel differently. So on the technical committee, we look at all those parameters, and based on the demonstrated performance that we've gathered from the racetrack, we then can try to set those different parameters: vehicle weight, power, fuel capacity, and sometimes aero, such that the cars run together well, they compete together, they put on a great show, and base it on the best performing car. So there's a pro and I don't like the term, but there's a pro-am setup in GTD. So you would use the best performance of each of those manufacturers to use as the reference car when setting the BOP. Hopefully that it makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Is that something you wanted because it was good for racing or good for entertainment?
Well,
or is it both?
Awesome question. I think it's both in the case of sports car racing, because one of the things that attracted me back in 1979 when we talked, or when I first saw it, as we talked earlier, there was such variety, and in our case, with 18 manufacturers that had chosen to race with us, which we're so proud of and so thankful for. The variety is I think what is one of the most intriguing things for our fans. So there is an entertainment element to it, because the fans come and, Jason, you may decide that the Lexus is your favorite, and I may decide that I'm rooting for, the Ferrari or the BMW or the Corvette this weekend. And so that attachment of the fans to those brands is, I think, a critical part of BOP. At the same time, because of the variety, the OEMs know that they want to come and market like an auto row, if you will, in your town where all the dealerships are. And so entertainment for sure, technical for sure, and a laboratory, I think, for all the OEMs to either showcase the current version of the car or develop some things that might be part of the next generation of that model or that brand.
Hopefully you're enjoying Cars and Culture with Jason Stein. Like and subscribe to see more and enjoy the rest of this interview.
The list of manufacturers that you have, John, and you just went through a few of them in this series is long, from Aston Martin to Hyundai, Ford to Ferrari. How in the world do you keep all of those egos in check?
Similar to the drivers and the teams, it's challenging. But I also, we made a commitment to the manufacturers, and we continue to make it, that IMSA will be and remain a cost-effective, entertainment-driven automotive industry marketing tool. It's that simple. And they've all, I believe, heard that, understood that, and made commitments and investments to that. And so I think once you have that, and you have a set of rules that allow for them to come, understand that they'll have equal competition, understand that in some cases, especially in GT, and now even in GTP with the new prototypes, they have built a customer racing model. So they may be racing a, call it, factory endorsed team, like Corvette Racing had, or like Ford has said they plan to do with the new Mustang GT car. Porsche, of course, BMW, they all have these factory racing programs, but they also have customer programs. So knowing that they can sell that same car to a customer, and there's back to my previous life, a revenue and profit model, it's a business for a lot of the manufacturers as well. So we want to provide the stage for all of them to come perform and make their racing program a viable business. And I think that's what you've seen with the uptake. I also think just the marketing element of what we've done, this week at Daytona and over the next 10 days, there are going to be, 7 major manufacturer displays on the Midway to engage with, customers, to engage with fans. There's a ride and drive going on the outside of the Speedway. A lot of the manufacturers are launching vehicles at the event.
It's become a car show to some extent.
100%. And you've, again, with your great experience in the industry, you've seen what auto shows maybe were like, what they are like today, what the beauty of social media and the web and the opportunity to launch cars virtually. But over the last 3.5 years, now starting my 4th season, we've had over a dozen vehicle launches at our events where they're bringing dealer bodies in. As you know, a lot of the manufacturers have product committees and that type of thing among their dealers. They're launching vehicles at the racetrack, which again, that warms my heart, because that's what I always saw sports car racing and motorsports in general as being. It was a tool in the marketing toolbox.
Which manufacturers do you not have that you want?
Well, certainly we'd love to have more. Growing up around IMSA, I remember how strong the Nissan program was in GTP days and even in GT. Well, would love to have them back. They just launched a GT4 car that would fit right into our Michelin Pilot Challenge or in our VP Racing Sports Car Challenge. So love to have Nissan back. And that's part of the historian in me talking. Clearly we've got Toyota with the Supra, and of course their sister or brother brand Lexus is already here with us. We're excited about that. It's hard to say. We've done a lot of studies on what electrification looks like in motorsports going forward and retaining the entertainment value. So it's hard to say for me. I also here in my office, I've got a huge model car collection, and right above me is the Bob Tullius Jaguar GTP cars. Those things sounded so insane. So would love to see them back as well.
Recently, Cadillac announced it was joining forces with Andretti Autosport to form a Formula One effort. A lot of news around that recently.
Yeah.
But GM President Mark Royce was quick to say that they remain committed to endurance racing, what you're doing here at IMSA.
Yeah.
How long do you see this General Motors participation in American road racing?
Well, they're certainly a staple. When you think about our parent company, which is NASCAR, NASCAR owns IMSA. Chevrolet has been around since the very early days of stock car racing. They are the winningest brand in NASCAR. They then chose events like the Rolex 24, the 12 Hours of Sebring, Le Mans to showcase the Corvette, which is obviously their iconic sports car. Obviously in NASCAR, they currently race the Camaro, and I've been fortunate enough to be part of the Garage 56 project we're developing to take a NASCAR stock car, the Camaro, to Le Mans with the Chevrolet brand. They've done so much with Corvette racing. They have done so much for grassroots racing, circle track or road racing, you name it. So I think there's a big commitment there, and Mark stated it publicly. I also think that announcement is great for the sport. And I think our sport in general right now is, whether you're an open wheel person or a drag racing person or a NASCAR person or an IMSA sports car person, there is a trajectory for our sport right now that is another moment in history that we all need to grasp and probably grab onto and ride the sled as far as we can.
Well, and in fact, you mentioned Le Mans, the 100th running this year of Le Mans. I would guess you are a regular attendee.
I am. I was able to go and compete there for a couple of years, and in my previous life, we're fortunate enough to be on the podium, but been going since 2008. So this will be my 15th time, and now to go in my role on the IMSA side and work with Pierre Fillon and Frederic Lequin from the World Endurance Championship, and with Mr. France and Ed Bennett, we go there to celebrate that event every year. Now I'm back in the race team business with Garage 56, so that's been fun. I'm going to go there and change in from my suit and tie into a race team shirt at some point during the weekend. But I will be there, and what a milestone for everyone at the ACO, for sports car fans around the world. We're running the 61st Rolex 24 next weekend after we get the Roar done this weekend coming up, and for them to be doing 100 years of that great race,
That's amazing.
unreal. And you think about the fact that it's public roads and how special that is. And to this day, I think it's either the day before the race or even race day morning, you can drive down the Mulsanne in your own family car. So
And talk a little bit about, John, what you had to do to work with those folks who do run Le Mans to make sure your cars and their cars could play nicely together.
So again, I happen to be the lucky guy that arrived here at IMSA at a time where the manufacturers were at the peak of asking for that opportunity. The fans were begging for that opportunity of seeing the best of the best cars, drivers, teams, manufacturers, both here in North America as well as around the world and Europe. So, fortunately, I wanted to bring some OEM experience to my new role. And a lot of folks put a lot of time into this beforehand. Jim France, his dad, they had this vision for a long time. So Jim's vision, I would suggest certainly Don Panos's vision, when it was the American Le Mans Series. Don wanted that. Certainly my predecessor, Scott Atherton, of course, Ed Bennett and Jim to this day. And then you add in now Pierre Fion and his group. When you got that much momentum, I sat with Pierre Fion and Richard Mille from the FIA, just the three of us, and I said, if we don't figure this out together for once and for all, we should have some other people sitting here, because we have this moment, we have this opportunity, and we've got to do it. And everyone agreed. They had made a commitment, of course, to LMH, which is called Hypercar. We were pushing down the path of what the next version of our DPIs was. And we set up a set of rules that we think would work. And of course, we have a common hybrid system in our car. We've got an open opportunity for the manufacturers within an aerodynamic set of restrictions to design beautiful prototype race cars, and they are beautiful. And then working with Pierre and Richard on a convergence when it comes to tires. We're going to have similar tires. Certainly the Michelin brand supports that. We're going to have a way to maintain activation of a four-wheel drive and a two-wheel drive, because their rules allowed four-wheel drive, and a variety of other elements that led us to convergence, like going to a specific wind tunnel, so you have a controlled environment to determine the aero performance of these cars. And so a lot of work, technical team on our side, Simon Hodgson, Matt Kurdock, Terry Bouvet on their side. These guys have put in so much time to, because they're complicated race cars. I said to Jim, Mr. France, I said, Jim, we've been racing 747s. Now we're racing space shuttles.
That's right.
It's pretty complicated, but we're really excited, to be able to do that. And there's a lot of our teams that are planning to go to compete at Le Mans. Chip Ganassi is going to be taking a Cadillac to the World Endurance Championship. Action Express has announced that they intend to go to Le Mans with their Cadillac. The Penske Porsches, the 963s will be racing in IMSA and in WEC. And so now you're starting to see this uptake, and giving the fans, in the end, they're the fans are the ultimate beneficiaries.
Yeah,
they're going to get some incredible racing.
Speaking of fans, and a little bit more of a general question for you, we've had Toto Wolff and Zach Brown and Stefano Domenicali on this program within the last year. Are you amazed at the momentum that Formula One has in the United States at this point?
I'm amazed at the momentum that the sport has.
Yeah.
And I think due in large part to opportunity that they presented with the Drive to Survive series, which is put their sport in front of a broad audience. I also, without overextending my bias, but what my parent company NASCAR has done with going to race at the LA Coliseum.
Yes.
Like, are you kidding me? Like that's probably, I wasn't in the boardroom when those discussions were had, but I suspect maybe one of the board members said something like that. But when you look at that event last year, 70% of the people there had never been to a motor car race before. Wow. To do a street race in downtown Chicago this coming summer, like, are you kidding me? Like, I grew up in Chicago. That was a dream of mine, to see cars racing on Lakeshore Drive, since I was a little boy.
We've had Steve Phelps on the program describing that kind of trajectory. It's amazing.
Yeah. So a huge respect for what they've done on the Formula One side, but I think what it's done for the whole sport, as I mentioned earlier, is really, and if you rewind, and no one wants to talk about the pandemic over and over, but our sport, when you break it down, is one of the only sports that you can pull your car or your minivan or your camper up to the side of the fence, and the show is going on right in front of you. And we were an outdoor sport. NASCAR was the first sport professional sport to go back to activities, certainly without fans initially, but we built up to it. And then the same for us, with our road racing circuits, as we're able to have families come camp. And so I think it's been a real great opportunity throughout times when we were in quarantine or social distancing and things like that, words that we didn't really use very much before. But our sport allows for that. So really excited about the momentum that we have as an industry, and really excited to see what 2023 and beyond brings, both in new fan growth, but also in seeing additional manufacturers see it as a marketing tool.
Right now, you've got a big thumping internal combustion engine car that rumbles and gurgles, and that's part of the fan experience, right, John?
Yeah, for sure.
Is there a place? Is there a place for full electric endurance racing within IMSA?
It's an amazing question, and it's one that Mr. France, Ed Bennett, Mike Helton, who's on our board, have discussed a lot. And I mentioned those three elements of what IMSA is in terms of cost effective and industry marketing tool, but the middle part of that is entertainment driven. And so I think again, for those of us who've grown up around car culture and industry, sights, sounds, smells are really important. So I think we have to remember that as we consider where our automotive industry partners are headed with propulsion, with electrification, with alternative fuels. And it'll be incumbent on us to make sure that we remain relevant for them as a marketing tool. And it will also be incumbent on us to make sure that the product we put on the track is definitely entertaining. I think there's some fun things I've thought about is, maybe you and I can sit in the stands and decide what our favorite exhaust note was, even though it's an electric race. And I want, car number 8 to sound like, you name it, a flat 6 or a V8 or a turbo or a non-turbo or a V12. I think there's some unique things we can do. The key part to me is remain relevant to the auto industry, remain entertaining to the fans, and then we'll see what happens after that. So I think there's a lot of solutions. We hope that the hybrid system combo with the ICE and a new renewable fuel that we're bringing this year, those types of things linked together in a chain, that might be heading in a direction. And obviously the OEMs have spoken, they've committed. They think that's the way to go at this point.
For sure. Where's the next challenge for IMSA? And will you be there to take it on?
Well, certainly next week at the Rolex 24. we got the Roar before the 24 coming up this weekend. Next week at the 61st running of the Rolex 24. That's a big challenge to launch these new GTP cars with the new hybrid systems. That's a big one. But just this week, I was talking to Simon Hodgson, who leads our competition department and who's been such an integral part of launching these new GTP cars. And we asked ourselves in that meeting, just he and I, what's next? Because we started talking about these GTP cars back in 2018. That's the development cycle of these cars. Now, the rules that we're launching this year are 5 years of homologation, but we need to start talking with all of our 18 OEM partners now about what the future looks like, and talk about electrification and maybe what we have now in terms of ICE and hybrid. How does that develop? And we've got a new renewable fuel that we're launching in competition at the Rolex 24. What's next after that? More renewable than we are. We're going to be 80% this year. We hope to get to 100. But what comes after that is there's been talk about hydrogen. There's been talk about a fuel that I ran back in the days when I was running the prototype program, which was an isobutanol. So there's all these different opportunities that we have, and I think there's no question I want to be here for that, God willing, and I also want to be part of that next chapter that we open up for our sport, and as I said earlier, mainly for our fans.
Well, I know where you will be before the start of the Rolex 24 at Daytona. On Saturday morning, you're going to pop into a corner store. You're going to grab a bottle of chocolate milk, a newspaper. You're going to sit down, find a little quiet time, and then you're going to walk through the paddock before anybody gets there, right? You're going to keep that tradition alive?
Yeah, you're making my eyes tear up because you obviously did your research, first of all, and you also you pegged it. There's one thing when I was a little boy going to the racetrack, I always loved being in the paddock in the morning. Sometimes the sun was coming up or they just come up. Men and women turning wrenches. You hear an occasional wrench clang together. No one could start their engines before a certain time in those days. I think it was 8 o'clock with local noise ordinances and whatnot. But it was a calm before the storm time for me.
Yep.
And I got into that tradition when I was at Mazda, of getting into the garage as soon as it opened, before anybody else walked in. And I'd go sit in the garage with, actually with the race cars that were about to go compete. Chocolate milk's been my thing. When we used to go racing as a family, we could stop at the local store before going to the racetrack, and Dad and Mom always let me get something, and I always grab chocolate milk, and it's my favorite beverage to this day. And but I love that moment, and I think now, the camping is sold out for the Rolex 24. The place is going to be completely jammed, and I may have, because of the excitement level, more fans in tow than I could ever imagine, wanting to see what's in the garage area.
Wow, amazing. Well, you deserve the milk, you deserve the quiet time and the storm, John. Thank you for sharing your story on Cars and Culture. And it is the Rolex 24 and the start of the whole season, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck.
Thank you, Jason. I am so honored that I was able to be on with you, and thanks to all your listeners. And they could tune in to NBC next Saturday, January 28th, to watch the 61st running of the Rolex, and as we open up what I like to say is now the platinum era of endurance sports car racing.
The green flag dropping on the platinum era of endurance racing, thanks to John Doonan. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Hopefully you enjoyed this interview on Cars and Culture with Jason Stein. Like and subscribe. Come back and see more interviews with actors, athletes, musicians, business leaders. It's all right here on Cars and Culture.